Hey y'all, let's talk about the phantasmal body of the witch. There's a common cosmological model found in many of the initiatory streams of traditional witchcraft. They have different names depending on the tradition you find them in because, as I've said before, every iteration of traditional witchcraft, every tradition, every house, arises in the bioregion in which it's nestled, and it takes on the textures and resonances of that bioregion. The tradition that I'm a part of, the Anderson fairy tradition, has a particular knack for travel. It is the tradition of itinerant workers and immigrants and people who are nomadic and have moved across the earth. And so the fairy tradition has a special contagious quality where it can sort of take root in any place it finds itself. It is partially for that reason that I have taken it upon myself as a project, as an initiate of the fairy tradition, to expose myself and to study other similar traditions that are sort of cousins to ours, so that we can become bigger and greater. That I believe that no one tradition has all the answers, and that when we interact with each other, we can make our traditions bigger and better. So saying that, the words that I typically use when talking about the three souls of this cosmological model are specifically chosen so that there can be interrelation between traditions, that we can sort of understand where we're coming from, since each tradition will probably have its own jargon and particularly textured lore around each soul. So the model is often referred to as the three souls, or the triune soul, or the triple self. In my tradition, I call them the fetch, the aura, and the daemon. And we call this a cosmological model because it's not just three souls, it's also three worlds, and each soul is sort of rooted or nestled within each world. And we know that nothing comes from nothing. And as an animist witch, I personally believe, and that's how I teach, that there is no such thing as the insubstantial, that there is no such thing as the non-material. The only thing that doesn't exist is non-existence. So saying that, each of these souls is a substance. It is a material that can be used magically. And each of these worlds is a place that we already exist right now. So becoming aware of each soul or each self allows you to access these worlds. You know, you could kind of think of a world as a self, and changing your consciousness, changing the state of awareness that you're in, allows you to change what world you're perceiving. First up, we have the fetch. I often think of the fetch as sort of the hinge of magic around which things turn and move. It is our dreaming self. It is our ancestor self. This is the part of us that is reborn through many lifetimes. Because of this, our spirit relationships that can outlast a single lifetime are connected or bonded or married at the fetch, so that those spirits can follow us through our transmigration of our soul through worlds and bodies. The fetch is made up of many parts. Two big main parts, which are sort of its blackness and its redness. Its blackness is like a shadow, or the shadow. It's the place where we touch the underworld. It's our own personal part of the underworld. And when we do inner journeyings, that's typically where we're going. We're going into that underworld self compartment, and there are passages out of that into the bigger underworld that's shared by all the dead. But that's sort of where we connect into the underworld through our fetch. This is also where the blood soul is in those of us who are alive. This is the part of us that is interpenetrated by the spiritual forces of other animal species. Typically, they're connected to family lines, or they're inherited through ritual passing of power. We are often born with a native fetch beast, or some people call this the second skin, but you can always gain more through the gift of the spirits. And it is this quality that the blood soul can do that allows us to have tactile and tangible access to the other world, and the ability to affect this world when we're performing witch flight. The fetch is a part of the underworld, so it's the underworld within us, and it's the opening into the underworld. It's seated within the pelvic cauldron of the body. The whole pelvic area can be thought of as a cauldron, and that's where the fetch is seated. The fetch is sticky in that things it comes into contact with, it leaves these threads of connection between it that have to be either intentionally broken, or they can sort of dissolve over time, but it takes a long time for that to happen. And that's sort of part of its shadow quality. You know, everything around us is made of dead bodies outside. The ground, the soil is made of the dead bodies of plants, animals, and minerals that have been dissolved. We are surrounded by death, and death is what allows life to grow. The very life spark of our own magic grows in that fertile soil of death. All of the selves you have ever been are buried within the fetch and can be unearthed and through a kind of necromancy given life. Let's move on to the middle world soul, or the place I often call the horizontal realm. You know, this is the world of the daylight world, that we're all awake in right now. You know, where the sun moves from east to west, where time seems to move in a straight direction. It's very horizontal. As opposed to the vertical perceptual axis that is plunging into the trance. The aura is the daylight self. It is the waking understanding of who we are. It is the shining body that surrounds us like an egg. It is the astral self. It is very starry. Some people call this the breath soul, and it is seated in the ribcage cauldron. It is where the matrix of our personhood takes form. It comes into us when we breathe our first breath of life when we're born, and it typically leaves us when we breathe out our last breath at death. In most people, this self does not survive death. It is sort of breathed out, and it depersonalizes or disperses into the wind of the world, the cosmic soup. However, really creative people, really powerful sorcerers who are strongly willed can sort of snare or capture this self, and if it's given the seal by the Queen of Fate herself, and you can become one of the mighty dead, or the sorcerer saints, as I like to call them. They are truly artificer souls. They are creatives to the nth degree, whether they're occult practitioners or not. Really creative folks can sort of put a seal on this self where their personality is maintained after death, and that part of them sort of goes off into nature to suckle at the roots of trees, as we like to say, and it becomes a spirit in the wild that we can learn from. The auric body is breathed in, and it's maintained by our breath connections. There's sort of this pulse point that happens, this breathing in and out that happens, that's this dialogue, this congress with the living world. And that's what the soul does. It orients us to our living world while we're in a body. We can tell what's forward and back, up and down, right and left through this medium. It's also where all of our cleverness and our intelligence lies. And it's very much the here and the now of the body perspective. And finally, we come to the daemon genius, the daemonic body or soul. This is the hardest part of us to witness and capture and to talk about. It's the most mysterious part of us. It is essentially the immortal form. It is our truth and wholeness. It is our destiny. There's a saying in my coven, the breath is fed to the bones through the blood. That there's this typical practice you find in many different traditional witch houses called brightening the bones. And it is the feeding of the white fire of the spirits over a lifetime to your skeletal system. It's a way of storing this starfire through a lifetime of practice. So The daemon is said to be nestled in the cauldron of the skull. In fact, often in the fairy tradition, we see it or witness it as a globe or fractal or flower of light just above our heads that's sort of a deep dark blue, or sometimes it's golden, or sometimes it's blue white or silver. It depends on how you see it. But however you see it, witnessing this part of yourself is profound. It is at our very center, and it surrounds us. It is both center and circumference, which is a really important concept in the fairy tradition. It is, while being both center and circumference, it is boundless, it is infinite, it is eternal. This is, like I said, the immortal form. And witnessing the mist body or the bone soul is an experience of our true nature as witches. You know, it's not talked about very often, but there is typically an otherkin quality to the demonic self, that witches tend to experience their demonic nature as mythic entities of sorts. I know folks who have an experience of themselves as angelic in some respects, or as fae-born, or as an ancestor, a particular ancestor reborn, or, you know, all kinds of beings who experience sort of shape-shifting uncontrollably. And these are all things that sort of come from our demonic nature. And it's also taught in my tradition that the spiritual power, you know, we divide the spirits sort of in a non-hierarchical spirit taxonomy that we call the 4 spirit courts, that are color-coded: red, white, glass, or green, and black. And the spiritual power and the virtues associated with those powers that are strongest in the witch, that is said to be where we are crowned. And we are crowned at our daemon. For me, the forces that are strongest in me are the black and the white forces. And so I am crowned in the black. That's how we talk about it. My apprentice is crowned in the green. My fetch mate, my spirit familiar, my fairy spouse, he is crowned in the green. My apprentice's spirit spouse is crowned in the white. So there are all these interesting ways to combine powers, because, you know, when witches work together, we're sort of creating a cauldron brew, as it were, combining the different natures so that they create something unique and precious. I think that's why it's really important that witches work together, and I'll talk about more of that later. But when we work together, we are improving the places where we're weak by working with people who have complementary forces to our own, and it can only help us to work together. Many hands turn the wheel. So we need all the parts of ourselves to do magic well. And in fact, in the traditional houses, this access to these 3 worlds and these 3 souls, and the waking awareness of how to work them together and align them and move power through them, that is one of the biggest ways that we use our bodies, our phantasmal bodies, to move magic and to make things happen in the cosmos. So I hope that you enjoyed this, and good hunting.